welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and Hunter Rigs to that 6+++ show. I'm your host, Tom, and I'm here for us. This is slightly overdue. I apologize. This is one we've been promising you for a little while, and due to a lot of the universe shitting all over us, we haven't managed to make it happen yet, but we're finally here. I've got my good friend Brian here, Brian Seipp of Ignite. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to finally be here. Feel like we're finally
Yeah.
checking that thing off the list.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to do, right? It's been kind of in our outstanding for a little while, and work and illness and just general festive busyness has kept between us. But we're gonna get it done, and it's very very exciting. So obviously we are talking about the wonderful Orks, the Green Menace, one of the sort of premier sort of pushy, angry melee armies of 40k, and it's an army you know very well, which we'll unpack in a moment. But it's an army that I think has quite a nice niche in the game at the moment, has some interesting things going on, and is one that I think people need to understand and respect. Otherwise, they may find themselves getting caught out there. So it should be quite a good one to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
Before we launch into Orcs specifically, do you want to tell people a little bit about you and your background and everything else before we get started?
Sure. So I started playing. I moved to the UK for grad school kind of in
Mhm.
2019, and then COVID happened immediately.
Yeah.
So kind of sat there trying to decide what I'm going to do with myself, and decided to get back into 40k, as many people probably have.
Oh yeah.
So when COVID started dying down, I started looking at trying to do more competitive tournaments,
Mm.
and that's when I met the person who ruined my life, Innes Wilson, uh, who uh, who really kind of helped me kind of learn about the tournament scene and the people in it, and
Mhm.
help me kind of transition from tournaments are kind of fun to this is how I really enjoy playing 40k.
Yeah.
And then from there, I started looking at it's I've been a strong proponent always of the belief that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was kind of true for kind of 40k practice as well,
Mhm.
where if the only person I can really play I'm in my local area and get better is Innis, and even then I don't get to play him very often, then I should look into other mediums for that. So I started
Mhm.
looking at TTS,
Mhm.
where there are loads of people who are way better than I am.
Yeah.
Started playing on there, and that's where I kind of got to know Dave, Gaylord a bit, and Yokult and the other members that would eventually come to form Ignite.
Yes, very nice.
And
Very
so
nice.
we kind of sat there and decided, hey, let's make a team of limited number of people that are all like serious about the game,
Mhm.
play the game in the right way, take sportsmanship very seriously, but also like want to collaborate and work together and
Yeah.
really try and do something here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Ignite's become. We picked up a
Yeah.
couple of people along the way. Liam VSL, Myson from Team Poland, who I
Mhm.
think many people maybe aren't as familiar with, but should be.
Mm.
Um, and you've kind of got a nice eight man roster now, which is
Oh,
pretty great.
great. Yeah.
Lets us sub people in for 5-man team events or put up a proper eight for TTS scrims and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So or actual scrims or actual events, excuse me. And yeah, just been kind of riding that wave. It's been
Yeah.
fun. It's been
Yeah.
good.
Very good times. And yeah, I mean, Ignite, one of the premier forces in 40k right now. So we've got the ITT looming. So we're gonna see if you guys just continue to bring those home. So that's gonna be a really interesting subplot of the weekend. Wonderful. Okay. Well, so the first time I ever met you was I'd got a little bit out of my depth at Leicester and ended up in the semi-final. And I'd seen your very beautiful Orc army playing against, I think, Kyle Grundy's tower a round or so before. And I remember I'd gone up to you and said, I think these Orcs look amazing. And then I ended up playing against and indeed being destroyed by said Orcs in a good game. Majikari didn't like Orcs very much at that point in time. And it was a very lovely game. I was very struck by, again, as you say, someone who plays, but you have someone who plays very well, but plays exactly the right way and has a lot of fun with it as well. It's a ridiculous game. We were joking a lot about the ridiculousness of the game
It was a
whilst
blast.
playing it.
Still one of my favorite games. I think I've
Yeah,
played.
it was just lovely. Really, really delirious high point of the event for me. So,
Yeah.
but Orcs, obviously for you, that was your first big event win, I think, with Orcs, right, at Leicester.
That was my first, I think, event win ever.
Yeah,
Actually,
so
this
there you
was
go. So
big
that
win.
was I met you on the way to your sort of your debut success. So I guess
That's
Orcs have a slightly special place in your heart.
Oh,
Like,
that's for sure. I've always liked them from a gameplay perspective, but one thing I've always tried to do, because for a minute there when I was collecting armies, I was decided that I wanted to kind of have everything. I wanted to be able to play everything, but quickly realized that's intractable, right? You're never actually going to be able to do that.
Yeah,
So what I decided to do was kind of pare it down to um, different ways of playing the game, right? So
that's smart.
I have Tau, which is very much a shooting army, not combat. I have Orks, which is very much a combat army and no shooting. And I have a couple other armies that are kind of slightly in between there, kind of keeping around a 3 to 4 kind of in my
Yeah.
rotation. And so Orks have always been that kind of go army I go back to, and especially kind of with Leicester. I my first time at Leicester, I was lucky enough to win it. Then I went back the following year and I lost in the finals to Vic.
Oh,
And so it's kind of become this tradition where, like, no matter what I've been playing at the time, when Leicester comes around, I got to always point back out. And when I do that, inevitably leads to a string of me playing the army for a while.
yeah, absolutely. And because I think that's why I decided I'd get in touch with you, because I saw that the Leicester had come around. You'd been suckered back in by the nostalgia, and you were giving them a run. And so actually, you've been on a good run with Orks in recent times. Bearing in mind this is not an index that is in the overpowered or broken area whatsoever. You are putting up very nice results and winning loads of games with them. So I think you're very well qualified to tell people a little bit about where they sit at the moment, and then we can also think, going forwards towards the data slate and what the new horizon might be as well. But as you've alluded to, Orks have a particular character and role in the game. Do you want to maybe unpack a little bit on how you see that, what their kind of niche is, what they're best at?
Yeah. So I think Orks, um, their Orks are very explosive, right? So they are actually they're not a particularly fast army at their core. They move 6, they have transports that move 12. Um, but once per game, they get to activate this ability called the Waaagh,
Yeah.
when suddenly their whole army can go to the other side of the board. You just advance and charge, and you just are suddenly just like in people's faces. So
Yeah.
what Orks tend to like to do, certainly it's the way I like to play them, is they like to kind of drive to the middle of the board, find some safe little nooks and crannies to kind of stick themselves into, and then force your opponent to engage you,
Yeah.
or just sit there and kind of collect your points, right? So,
Yeah.
And then when the opponent comes closer to try and fight you, which they inevitably have to, suddenly you can then call the Waaagh
Yes.
and then try and just remove their models from the board, right? So, it's kind of where I've gone with my list, is kind of 2,000 points divided by Power Claw.
Yeah, that's very nice. Yeah, exactly. Doing the Waaagh turn, as you say, you get advance and charge, you get additional strength, additional attack as well, right? I think.
Yes, and
Yeah,
5 of them long.
and it's just the reach on that turn is very surprising. And as you say, if it's done right, and I think good Ork players know when to wait and to pick their moment for using it. But when it's done right, you're sort of putting out such a series of problems and delivering such a hit that the rest of the game's then going to be defined by the opponent trying to recover from that, which is then them exactly where you want them, because they're reacting to you, right?
It's what I would call a pressure army. So this idea of you kind of reach the mid board, and then you can attack your opponent. Your opponent is so busy trying to not die that they're not scoring any points, right?
Yes, exactly.
And meanwhile, your little toys that you would use to get to the mid board, your trucks or your grots or any little bike units or something like that, are sitting there just digging through trash, collecting points, while your opponent is desperately trying to kill your things that are killing him. And sometimes they fail to kill those things, and you just table your opponent.
You just kill them.
But just as often you'll find that you're getting tabled, but by the end of it, you have 50 more points than your opponent. And it didn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's a few armies that play in that style, right? And the sort of the projection, do a bunch of damage. If it wins you the game, great. But if not, as you say, you end up in a sort of fighting retreat situation where you're just protecting that differential, just keeping that score difference. And Orks, obviously, one of the sort of classic armies for doing that. And I think maybe in comparison to some of their competitors in that field, they have a real width of assets as well, right? They've got a lot of stuff, lots of little bitty units.
There are a lot of different armies that do this, and they do it in different ways. Sometimes they're better at it than Orks in certain ways. For example, World Eaters are an army which is much faster than Orks and must be more consistently fast than Orks. They can get advance and charge every single turn. They get scout moves. They get +2 moves. They're more resilient because they all 3 have armor saves, 5 have if you want to pains.
Yeah, exactly.
But what Orks get, compared to armies like that, is they go wider. They've got more stuff, right?
Yep.
And they've got more stuff that also allows you to achieve things that are harder to do when you have less assets. They
Yes.
also have some assets that are really, really tough.
Yeah.
Mainly like the dinosaurs,
Yeah.
Stegosaur, Mazrog, stuff like that, where you have this like 3 up armor, 5 up invuln, or 4 up invuln, and a 4 Fiona Pain with 9 wounds at T10, and you can do -1
Yes.
wound. And then suddenly your opponent's shooting their whole army at this thing that's just standing on the midfield objective,
Yeah.
and they're not killing it. And so
Yeah.
it results in your opponent having to actually use real assets to try and
Yes.
engage this guy to fight your primary, which then pulls your opponent closer to you,
Yeah.
making your explosive turn that much more effective and
Yeah.
that much more reliable.
Completely. Yeah. And I think that's where I think really good orc players really shine, is where, yeah, you've just creating a situation where it feels like valuable assets are being drawn off to do things they don't want to do in places they don't want to go, getting hit back hard, or wasting huge amounts of resources just killing something that ultimately isn't that important as well.
Mm.
It's very satisfying killing an orc truck, but it's a truck. It's 60 points or whatever. It's 65 even with the rise. And so, you use these very precious activations sort of scratching at the problem, but not actually necessarily really resolving it. And I think, yeah, I love armies where there's a lot of assets on the board, and I think they really let you sort of dominate the actual mission. And I think that's where orcs are really good. It's not a style for the faint-hearted. It feels like a lot of stuff dies.
It's very fragile.
Yeah,
A lot of the tools in your army get removed extremely easily.
yeah,
So you have to be very aware of where can my opponent get to,
mhm,
and that risk versus reward analysis is really important. As
yeah,
you're saying, you're never going to be able to hide your whole army. But what you need to do is you need to make sure that, okay, if I put this thing here, my opponent can only get activation locking is kind of a theme that I draw up a
yes,
lot. So
yeah,
it's this idea of like, okay, well, he can go here and he can kill my box, like my truck that my guys are inside, but he's not going to be able to kill the contents,
yeah,
because then my contents are suddenly now, because of where he went to shoot my truck, close enough to kill the thing that just killed me. And so he killed a truck, and I killed his damage dealers. Right?
exactly that.
So and there's a lot of those kinds of trading and being aware of where your opponent can get to,
Yeah,
and putting your opponent and putting your things in a position where they can threaten, to force your opponent to respond in, as you said, ways they don't want to.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so it's pretty fun. I think it rewards good
I
playing.
think it's really fun. Yeah, exactly. And I think they're deceptively hard to play. And I have been all the way through this edition because, yeah, so this wasn't a jacked index. It's good, and it's actually one of the ones that genuinely does have really interesting combat in it. There weren't a ton of those at the start, but obviously the way the game was for the first few months, they felt like that wasn't a positive when everyone's just deleting you with different things. But I guess if we talk about the index before we move forwards and we think about the sort of tricks and tools it gives you, what have you found to be your sort of go-tos in terms of, enhancements and stratagems from the index that have stood the test of time over the last few months as the edition kind of matures?
It's kind of interesting actually, because I think that when the army was initially looked at for 10, one of the leading kind of directions that it was taken in was from WTC with Team USA. They took orcs with a ton of orc boys and trucks and
Yes, I remember those.
tracks. And yeah, just went super wide. And the idea was like, if you ever take a step backwards, you just lose the game because you can't score enough points, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then there's kind of another version of the army which has been piloted by another Team USA guy, Sean Naden,
Yeah.
where it's kind of these 20 boys with gas call inside of a battle wagon, and they do a ton of damage, and it's kind of interesting. But I had really been playing Eldar for the majority of 10th edition, because I'm that guy. Um, but then
For a
Lester
while,
came.
that was the sane way to deal with the edition, I think, to
Yeah,
be fair.
and then Lester came, and I looked at the army, and I decided to go in a totally different direction. So
Mm,
I kind of played this initial game with the dinosaurs, and I realized like, hey, 4 Fiona Pain's really good.
yeah.
Um, and then I was like, what if I just took that to the extreme? And so I took 3 mega armor war bosses, which nobody was really taking at the time,
Yeah.
with mega armors, knobs, and they all 4 Fiona Pain in the Waaagh turn is one of their abilities. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
as many 4 Fiona Pains as possible was the initial theme.
Yeah.
And I fully expected to drop the mega armor, knobs, and just have the one war boss as like maybe a missile you use something. But then it ended up actually being pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of the lesson that I got from that is like it almost spawned like an entirely new archetype. Where now like I'm playing
Yes.
with 2 units of mega knobs, which nobody was really taking, at least that I
Mm.
saw. We have the MSU kind of knobs and stuff and like that. And it really, I think, has shown me that there is so much depth to this book that
Yeah.
hasn't been solved yet,
Mm.
which is pretty cool. Which is totally different. I think I just realized from the question you actually asked me about the.
No, but I say I'm excited because I said we'll talk about Mega Knobs in a moment. So, but we can start there. Let's start with the units because I think that's kind of giving us a sense of how you see this and how you play. And I've seen a few people since starting to use the knobs and the Mega Knobs more, so it's clearly been influential. But what is it those units offer you, perhaps that some of the earlier builds didn't?
What I like about the Meganums is well, maybe I'll start with what people don't like about Meganums actually. So what people don't like about Meganums is that they only have two attacks, right?
Yeah,
And so two attacks for a premium combat unit seems sketchy.
yeah,
But then you got to remember that in the Waaagh turn they get an extra attack, so they
yeah,
go up to three. They also, the entire army has sustained hits, the ability to use strat for sustained fives.
Mhm.
So you could look at that as 3.5 attacks almost.
yeah,
And then they also, their weapons are twin linked at
yes,
straight 12 to 13, AP3, damage 2. And
yes,
so what that gives you access to two things which orcs don't actually have, usually, which is AP3. Most of
yep,
their army is AP2,
yep,
which is massive against a lot of things like AOC and stuff like that.
yep,
And also, or like two of armor saves, especially against like Redemptor Dreadnoughts and the like. And also rerolls. Orcs just
yes,
don't get rerolls, right? So having a twin linked weapon is phenomenal. You know, if you're winning
yes,
on threes and you're rerolling, you're hitting 89% of the time. So even if you have a bad roll, you're probably picking it up and getting average after two rolls there.
yeah,
So what Meganobs do that other things don't is, yes, they have lots of attacks, but when they do damage, they do damage, right? It's like they connect. You know
yeah,
that they're going to kill the thing that you're going to kill. It's only limited by the volume of attacks you have. They also get devastating wounds, which is a nice
yeah.
little tool to have, which is another kind of fairly rare thing in the Ork book.
Mm.
Um, so but the other side of it that they get too is when you hit somebody with Meganobs, or hit somebody an Ork unit, usually in the following turn, your opponent's crackback turn, you're used to your units just disappearing, right?
Yeah,
They tend to the invuln save helps, and maybe you can spike up a little bit, keep a little more than you want. You start to have these kind of little rat units running around with OC kind of being annoying and holding things up, and as you said,
mm.
this kind of fighting retreat as you phrased it.
Yeah,
Meganobs actually, because they have two of armor saves, sometimes just survive.
yeah.
They just don't die.
They
You know,
require real application to deal with
yeah.
them.
So
Yeah,
they're two of armor saves. They can stand in cover, so they'll have one of armor saves effectively. They have 3 wounds each instead of two. Um, the war boss during in the Waaagh turn has a 4 up in Fiona Pain as well.
yeah.
I have never in any game I've played with this army had a war boss die in the Waaagh turn. It's never happened. Um, Sometimes they will kill the Meganauts, but they've never gotten to the war boss too. So that actually creates some interesting dynamics where you can position yourself where the war boss is in this like position to tag a bunch of things because you can be very confident that it's not going to die. I mean, the guy has
Mm,
7 wounds, 2 up armor save, 5 of invuln save, and 4 of Fiona Pain in the Waaagh
that's
turn.
smart. Yeah,
That's really hard to kill. So now suddenly you're not in a spot where your opponent can dig himself out with shooting if you put that character in a spot,
yeah,
which is a good spot to put him in.
yeah. And so I guess in terms of the overall sort of wave of the attack and the shape of the game as we've described it, what that means is you're buying yourself more time because there's a wave that is actually going to take a lot longer to deal with, and if any failure to deal with it on any point is going to just keep killing and causing even more problems in your subsequent turn, right? So they present a stodginess that is a bit of a surprise and a bit of an issue for the opponent. And yeah, I think I've played against them.
Yeah, and I think a
I
lot
have
of
a
people
healthy
aren't
respect
used
for
to
them
it.
now.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people aren't used to it, and they aren't really appreciative of exactly what is like toughness 6 is an interesting breakpoint for a lot of weapons. 2 of armor save against a lot of these AP1, AP2 weapons, especially when you're on cover, is quite reliable and strong.
Mm,
One thing that tends to happen in the Ork turn for things like boys and stuff is you lose a lot of guys, not to the good weapons, but to the little trash weapons that just happen to be shooting
yeah,
you, right? So like the
yeah,
little heavy stubbers and all that. Those weapons do nothing to Meganums. They just shred
yeah,
them off, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
now suddenly you're having to bring a lot of weapons that are high quality shots to bear on a single unit,
mm,
which can sometimes mean things are out of position to try and hit other units that you might
yeah,
have, which are maybe a little more fragile. And
completely.
so it just gives you a lot more agency. Trying to
Yeah,
keep them quiet.
it's nice. It's innovation. I like it a lot. It was good. It was good to see. I enjoyed the list, and I think obviously standard knobs. You've taken a more MSU approach, but knobs obviously in general are a really nice asset in orcs at the moment as a slightly more I guess glass cannon, although they do have some tricks going for them. But another asset in the sort of go turn that can hit quite hard that isn't maybe as expensive as the mega knobs. You want to elaborate on their role in this?
Yeah, so knobs are they have a ton of attacks at high strength. So 4 attacks each in a Waaagh turn. At strength 10, AP 2, 2 damage.
Oh,
They're hitting on 3s usually because Warboss tends to be in the unit, which is
yep.
great. They are somewhat survivable because they have a natural -1 to wound on
Yes.
them, which can become really useful, especially when you come out of a transport in a turn where somebody wants to kill you and they're battle shocked, so you can't do the -1 to wound stratagem on them.
Yeah.
But they just have it. That can be really useful.
Mm.
Sometimes you'll see people take big units of 10. I personally have found that a big unit of 10 kills just about everything in the game, but it's unnecessary, right? You don't
It's
need
a
it.
lot of points.
It's a big commitment into a thing which I'd rather. I found that I oftentimes would rather just send a 1 5-man knob unit out to deal with a thing that's being very frustrating or annoying, or maybe I send one out in the Waaagh turn, keep one in a truck for a follow-up wave,
Yeah.
and then you just kind of split those assets up, and I have kind of a something to hit back after they hit back me, or so
Yeah.
I can use one unit to kind of kill a screening unit that's annoying me, or something along those lines without a full commitment
Yeah.
from this giant block of guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I say, as you said, the 10 brick hits so hard, but it then is likely to get picked up in a way that some of the other stuff doesn't. And that's not gonna help you if you're trying to stagger things and keep the pressure up for a longer period of time.
Yeah, it's similar kind of argument to when people play Chaos Space Marines. They're like, do I take a 10-man
Yes.
squad or a 5-man? They're the list of one of my orc lists was, I can't believe it's not chosen. It's just like now where bosses it's kind of similar.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Resource, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's that thing where the game has got a lot of stagey transport sort of born units in it right now, and that's a big part of how combat armies are functioning. And it was interesting seeing your take on it. And it means you really can play that give and take kind of back and forth game into other armies that are doing the same thing. So let's talk sort of stratagems and enhancements to go with that. I mean, what sort of supporting juice do you tend to use that helps you to kind of navigate the different matchups that are out there?
So one of my favorite tools in my army is the Warboss and Warbike, or the Death Killer Wartrike.
Okay.
So this is a either 7 or 9 model. It moves 12. It auto advances 6, so it has an 18-inch move with an assault weapon and a pistol, which I don't know if picking up on the keywords, but that makes it excellent at doing actions, right?
Yeah.
They're little hard to kill. The T6, 4 armor, 5 of won't save. But there's an enhancement you can give them, which makes them a pain in the butt to kill, which just gives them a 4 Fiona pain.
Oh, that's fun.
So now you have this like a mini dinosaur that just wants to run around and do actions. He doesn't do a ton of damage. He's got a couple attacks at high strength, AP 2 damage, but what he does is he can go and do actions for you, and do actions in a way where your opponent isn't going to want to waste shots at him because he doesn't do much damage. He's doing actions, but you got a lot of stuff that can do actions. And he's actually really hard to kill. So a lot of times what I'll use is I'll stage him up on turn 1, and then turn 2 I'll jump into my opponent's deployment zone, throw into Waaagh turn, and do homers or something like that. And then the following turn, like one of my trucks will drive into the deployment zone, and he'll run off and do adventures where he's really hard to kill and really annoying in his kind of follow-up turns. And he's become one of the most valuable tools I've had, and that's all because of this enhancement.
Yeah.
The super cyborg body.
Yeah, it's cool. That's nice to see it, and it gives you a sort of mini Mozrog running around who's got a little bit of that energy, just too much effort to deal with.
Yeah,
but actually very flexible as a utility piece. No, that's smart. That's very, very smart. And is that it for the enhancements for you typically?
The other enhancements tend to be, if I've got points, I'll take them.
Yeah.
They're all very good.
Yes.
But I think they're less important considering how wide you're going. So one of the enhancements gives your guys devastating wounds, head wappas, kill choppa. People tend to put that on the Beast Boss and Squigosaur because he's got or the knob on Squig that they have, because they have anti-vehicle and anti-monster attacks, which pairs really nicely with the devastating wounds. And I think that's good. But I kind of feel like the dinosaur doesn't really do damage. He's too swingy.
No.
His job is to not die.
Yeah,
He's very
yeah,
good at that, and I just want to keep him as cheap as possible and have him just kind of run around and be an annoyance, hold
yeah,
objectives, that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Another one is Cunning but Brutal, I think is his name,
Hmm.
and that's fall back and charge,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is definitely useful. It's one which I've toyed around with my Meganobs, because that's actually quite interesting on a squad, as I said, that has a tendency to sometimes just survive.
Yeah,
Blockturn had to have the ability to then pull back from a charge and then re-engage somewhere else.
yeah, that's nice.
Can be really strong.
Mhm.
And then the last one, which is really good, is +2 move.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, Orcs moving faster. It's kind of good.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
they're all like I said, they're all really good.
It's a
Uh,
good suite of tools, actually. Really good suite
yeah,
of tools. Yeah,
they're just generally, usually if I can, I'd like to get more stuff,
yeah,
because stuff is just better in Orcs. You want to have as many tools as I can to make my opponent have to make as many decisions as possible.
yeah.
Um, and so I tend to do that. But they're all really good, and you can make a case for taking any one of them at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the discipline of committing to going wide, I think, pays off, right? And being ready to make sure that you have the assets. I'm very guilty. This is something I've always done is I buy too many toys. And I
Yeah,
need to do it less cute things, more just make stuff that works and stuff that does the job. And I think with Orcs, you do, although it's a big hoard of stuff, you do really have to see it as one big machine. So you need to have as many different tools as you possibly can.
yeah.
In terms of the
So,
stratagems, what do you find the key strats to be? What do you kind of lean on?
so 5 out of the 6 strats are amazing. One strat is terrible, which is if you're battle shocked, you can spend a CP on this unit to then let you spend additional CP on the unit to do a strat. It's just bad.
That's trash. Yeah, that's
I've
trash.
never used it.
Yep.
But the other ones are really good. So the two that I would say I use most often are, I forget their names, but one of them I think is Arta's Nails, which is -1 a wound, and
Yeah,
that
it's
works.
huge. It's huge.
It's yeah, any non-vehicle, non-Gretchen unit, 1 CP, -1 a wound. Um, the number of times where that just flips the damage that's coming in is huge,
Yeah,
especially when you look at things like Mazrog is tough as 10.
yeah,
Um, you can make something go from winning you on 3s to winning you on 4s, or if it's winning on 5s, it can win you on 6s,
yeah,
which can be huge. A lot of close combat attacks, for example, or Power Fist coming in strength 8.
yeah.
I think Thunderhammers are strength 8 too. I can't remember.
They
But
are.
then
Yeah, they are.
suddenly they're on 6s.
Yes,
Just like go takes you from this could be sketchy to survive to I'm just living through this.
yes, yeah,
That's another interesting, good reason for the Meganobs is that T6 breakpoint with -1 wound at T6 can get a little squirrely for some armies.
yeah. It's one of my favorite types of tools in the game because it just brutally punishes undercommitment. And then by the nature of it existing, your opponent has to overcommit repeatedly because it could happen anywhere,
Mhm.
and there's no point going in if you're just going to whiff and die. And again, that all creates that problem you were saying where they're being dragged out towards you, trying to fix fires and do different things, and that just opens them up for your counterattack. So it's really really cool.
Yeah, that strat is really good. Another strat which is pretty incredible is so I mentioned the army has sustained hits on 6s. There's a 1 CP strat where you get sustained or you get critical hits on 5s.
That's
So
terrifying. Yep.
yeah, so that's sometimes when you just a little bit of extra damage,
Yep.
that's incredible. It
Mhm.
also pairs really well, and this is kind of one of the core things about Sean's version of the list, is Sean's list has a 20-man boy unit, but it also has Gazcall. And Gazcall with Makari has a lethal hits aura in the Waaagh turn. And so now suddenly you have this 20-man orc unit that's coming in with 80 something attacks
Wow.
that are doing lethal hits on 5s,
Yes.
which it kills everything in the game. It's not even close. It's pretty impressive. So,
Wow.
so that's a really cool combo there. I think that sometimes catches people out. They don't realize
Absolutely.
how that works together.
Yeah.
Um, so those two strats are quite good. And then there's +2 move, +2 advance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, sorry, +2 advance, +2 charge. Excuse me.
Yep.
This strat is good. The biggest problem with this strat is its timing. The
Yes.
timing happens at the beginning of the movement phase, which means that if you're into transport, you can't use the strat.
Yeah, that's the issue with how they like to play, right?
Now there's lots of ways you can play around this. I tend to stage a unit maybe behind a wall. There's not too much indirect, and then that's my unit that's going to be getting that strat in the turn. So there are ways to kind of get value out of it, if you want to. But it's one which if it was just in the movement phase, it would be used every single turn.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's not means it's less often.
Yeah.
Then you have a 2 CP fight on death.
Yes. How do you feel about this one?
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So
It's my favorite Orc strat. I've only played a couple of games with them. This is the one I keep coming back to.
it's incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Where you can set up scenarios where there's no good trades for your opponent.
Exactly.
A lot of times against combat armies, if somebody has combat as well, they have fight first, or maybe they have CP to interrupt, and it can get a little weird. You can set up scenarios where, with careful positioning of models, you can activate, and then also make sure that you can fight on death with a unit, so you trade with them.
Yes.
And then usually a trade is perfectly fine. You don't mind if I did that. So that's super useful. I think the 2 CP version of this strat, a lot of armies that fight on death, there's usually 2 versions. Either you fight on death for 2 CP and everybody just fights, or you 1 CP fight on death, but it's only on 4s or something like that.
Yeah.
The 2 CP one, even though it's more expensive, is so much.
That's the one you want, because it gives you certainties, right, in a way that the 1 CP one just doesn't.
Absolutely.
And as you say, again, when you're going toe to toe with a bunch of armies, often quite elite armies, your World Eaters, your CSM, whatever else, that want to play that trading game. If you've got a strat where if I save this, I can hit you, kill something, you hit me, I'm killing something again. Give them a real activation problem with dealing with the wave when you land. I think it's extremely good. And yeah, the ones with 2 CP full fight on death are definitely in a better spot, I think, than playing roulette and hoping that your character rolls a 4.
for sure, it's much stronger. The last one is, I think, the most fun strat in the game. It's called Kareen.
Yep.
So I always tell my opponents about this, and then I tell them, don't plan for it. If it happens, it's just gonna happen, man. There's nothing you can do. So you can only use the stratagem when your vehicle blows up. So you have to actually roll 6 for it to explode. But then if it does, you get to move the vehicle, make a normal move of up to 12 inches, and then resolve the explosion from there. So that has a ton of consequences, right?
Yeah.
So the most obvious one is I make a normal move, or you can also move while you're engaged in combat now too with this version of the thing.
Oh, wow.
Go through people.
Yeah.
So the most obvious one is you can position your vehicle to explode and do the most damage possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the actual damage. Perhaps the most important implication is if your opponent sets up to kill transport, and then the guys pile out and they shoot the guys or charge the guys inside, and you explode in 1 CP, suddenly your transport jumps 12 inches, your guys jump behind a wall. Suddenly their entire plan gets ruined, and they're like, what am I supposed to do now? It's like, because they sit there, kind of holding the bag. So that has come up every time it comes up. It's always incredible.
Yeah.
I never plan for it.
No.
I'm always like, whatever. If I roll 6, I roll 6. But I do try and keep a CP around just in case it does come up.
Yes.
But it's just so powerful.
It is.
I've had games completely flip because of rolling that 6. I played a game recently against Nassim. We was using guard, and I went second, which is a rough situation.
Rough situation.
And then I careened with the unit of knobs, and suddenly my knobs went from being in my deployment zone turn 1 to the midboard, and then I was able to use them in a way as if I had kind of gone first. So it made a big difference.
That's huge. Yeah. It's a lovely strat, because, as you say, it's complete chaos.
Yeah.
But it's also so powerful. As to say, a trick you can't rely on, but that can just turn games. It's really, really funny. Very, very orky. Let's move ahead then. I mean, obviously, since we started planning this, there's been changes. We've got a data slate. We've got a kind of shift in armies. I think probably the most useful way of picking your brain is to look forwards rather than backwards, and think about what this latest set of changes mean for Orks. So I guess if we start with what if anything has changed for Orks specifically in the sort of data slate and other things, and then we'll think a little bit about where you think they're going to be in the game going forwards for the next few months. What if anything happened to Orks in the data slate?
Not a ton, actually. So Orks got a little bit of taxes on the things that people tend to take. So trucks went up 5 points each.
Okay.
If you're taking 5 to 6, which is kind of the most you can take, you're looking at a 25 to 30 point increase, kind of in my army. That's what happened. Knobs went up 5 points for 5.
Okay.
Again, not a big deal.
Yeah, mild. Yeah.
Squig Hog boys went up about 10 points, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Maybe 5 or 10 points, I can't remember. For units of 3, which is a bit unfortunate because
That feels a little harsh on them, I have
yeah,
to say. Yeah.
they're kind of hard to use because they don't
Yeah.
go through walls. So that was a little unfortunate. And then I think there are a couple other small point increases, but nothing major. As far as things coming down, battle wagons came down 20 points,
Okay.
which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
Battle wagons are really good. The problem battle wagons have is you're paying points for the 8,000 guns that they can take that nobody wants to take.
Yeah.
So they have so many guns that they can take, and since all war gear is free now, they have to be baked into the cost of the model. So
Yeah.
this could probably be 120, 130 point vehicle, which was just no guns, T12, lots of transport capacity, and it would
Yeah.
be awesome. It would be awesome. It'd be
Yeah.
a lot of in a lot of armies. As it is, it's now it was 185 points, I think. Now it's I think 165.
Okay. Okay.
Um, it's closer to reasonable. It is good. It's hard to kill. T12, 3-up armor save, armor contempt as a data sheet rule.
Yeah,
Uh,
sort of baby Land Raider energy in a way.
yeah. And because of the nature of the Ork army, if it makes it to your Waaagh turn, it kind of becomes functionally immortal because your opponent just can't deal with it. They just don't have time or resources,
Yeah.
right? So that's pretty cool. But I would say that's one of the major changes. Killicans went down from 150 points to
Yes, I did see that.
155.
Yeah.
So that's cool. They're just not very good.
Yeah,
They
the
seem like
shooting's
they should
fine.
be. Yeah, the shooting's
Yeah.
fine. They give up 6 bring it down points for
That's actually the main issue, isn't it?
so that's a problem. It's something I want to experiment with. A bunch of the buggies, actually, I think all the buggies came down as points as well. I think around 5 to 10 points each. It's actually kind of interesting. I haven't tried it yet, but I really want to try 15 buggies because you can get all 3 of each buggy type, so 15 of them for 1,230 points, I think.
That
So
doesn't sound like a ton.
yeah, so you still get like almost 800 points of stuff in addition.
Wow.
So I don't know if it'll be any good. It's obviously free bring it down, but it is kind of cool, just the idea that
Yeah, and you've got the buggies around because I
yeah,
remember them.
every Ork player who was playing back then
Yeah,
has
exactly. Oh,
buggies.
that's interesting. I mean, obviously, that's one of those changes. I feel like with both killer cans and buggies, until there's more different rules layers to apply to them, rather than the very combat centric sort of goths, as it were,
Mhm.
detachment that we have. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold, but yeah, there's definitely more potential there now than there was. If we think then about orcs in the meta going forwards, where do you kind of feel like they're going to be sitting, and what do you feel the kind of positive and negative sort of matchups in the meta that might be emerging are?
So I actually think that they came out pretty well because
Yeah, I'd agree.
they transitioned. I mean, they had more of a lateral move
Yeah.
in terms of the changes. Um, it was pretty minor effect on my list, for example. I think Sean's list went down in points. Um, so I think it's actually generally okay in terms of that for our changes. And then we look at some of the matchups that were challenging for us. Eldar was a match which, if the Eldar player played it correctly, was really hard. Not an uncommon thing to say about Eldar, I'm sure. But yeah, so that was really challenging. They've been slapped around. CSM was always a matchup which I think it was a game. I think it was actually quite interesting. But now that they've been beaten down so bad, they're far less reliable than they were.
Yeah,
Forge
their
Fiends
trades
are
are not feeling good into you now.
yeah, exactly. Forge Fiends are far less effective into you, for example, not having the rerolls.
Mm.
So that's definitely good. We'll have to see where they land in terms of what CSM players kind of come out of this writing and see
Yes.
where we're at. Because I
Yeah.
do think they're actually still quite a good
I
army.
I agree. They're still terrifying. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think guard being really good is questionable. I think
Mhm.
for works. I think guard came out pretty good in this. Only
Yes.
really seeing an increase in manticores and guard into orcs is a bit of a flip matchup, at least in my opinion. I think if orcs go first, they can get guard. If guard go first,
Yeah.
they and
Yeah.
and it's not really want to be.
No.
That said, though, the best army I think in the game, Krons.
Okay. Yep.
I think orcs are actually very good at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it turns out 80 attacks with lethal hits for
Yes.
Catan.
Yes.
The flash kits are also weirdly good at attacking Catan too.
They are. Yes.
So you just put saves on those things. If you can kill Catan, you're generally in a pretty good spot to fight Necrons.
Yes.
Coupled with the fact that orcs deal enough damage to kill wraith units as well.
That's it. It's the volume, right? We had them pegged. It was the one I had pegged. I thought I was high volume, very aggressive armies. I was like, that's what can actually deal with this and get into this. And the lethal hits is a really interesting one because, yeah, as you say, between Badrock's guys and this other player with Gaz, you've got a lot of ways of just slapping tons and tons and tons of wounds on.
Yeah, for sure. The new Drakkar detachment is interesting, but I just don't think they're able to compete with the orcs if they.
I don't think so
as well.
I don't really. I think for Drukhari, anything which is going to be hitting them and fighting on death is already just like.
Well, yeah, when
I've only got my 5 wounds.
Trade, right? Yeah, they want to kill without trading, and orcs just grab you by the throat and don't let you do that as they go
just
down.
Say, we're doing this now. Yeah.
It doesn't really quite work out. So
no, I don't think so.
I think overall a lot of the predators for orcs kind of at least went down. And then I think the things they're good at are in ascendance, which is kind of good. I think overall it's probably a bit of an improvement for orcs in terms of.
I think so.
But it's still going to require you to play tight. And I don't think they're like
that's it
now. I think it's.
Oh, not at all. I think we have enough evidence at this stage to say that the only players who've been thriving with orcs this edition are very good players. That's where they're at. They're not in a kind of push the button and go place. They require real finesse to use well. But as you say, it's promising that a lot of the worst matchups are on the down and some of the better ones maybe are more prevalent. Where do Custodes fit into this? Are they back? I don't really know. People are saying that they are.
Custodes look very good.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever really went away. I think
I agree. Yeah.
And now they're better than they were. So I think that makes them definitely ascendant. Custodes are probably the biggest concern. Them and Death Guard are really challenging matchups.
Yes. Yeah.
And both of them are quite good right now. So those are probably the parts that I'm most afraid of with orcs coming into it. I do think we can beat Custodes. I think it requires a lot of really careful play. Fight first is good, but you can beat fight first by just careful positioning of your models and taking advantage of your opponent's mistakes. Using grots to like base your opponent's good unit, and then you just tiptoe into one unit with your mega knobs, and then suddenly they fight first, kill the grots. Well done, I'm proud of you. And then you come in and kill them, right? So
grots doing exactly what they do. That's exactly. Literally their whole function.
Grots have been my pseudo fight last for a while now.
That's super good. Yeah, I love that. That's super smart.
So you just might have to design your list a little bit differently if you want to take them out. Make sure you have assets like that. Have some boy units, have some bike units, things that can run in and take the hit for your stuff. But I think Custodes is a game you can win. It's one that you're not favored in.
Yes. Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. That's kind of how I figured it would be. And so I think orcs that's the nice thing about orcs is they do have the toolkit to make even their worst matchups tough, for the opponent. But it's that's a particularly nasty set of things for the orc general to have to deal with. Okay, great. I mean, I think that's covered all the notes I wanted to cover. I think we know there's a book coming, so we're going to get you wish list to finish up. When the Orc book drops, what are like 3 things you'd love to see in it? What's missing for you as an Orc player right now?
So the single most important thing I would love to see orcs have is the Waaagh happen in a command phase.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
it's so frustrating having it happen in the battle round. And I'm not sure that Games Workshop really appreciated that they were in fact nerfing orcs by doing that. I think, if anything, maybe they thought they were giving them agency by letting them.
I think they did. Yeah.
But what it actually ends up doing though is taking all the agency away from the orc player. If you go first, it's such a different army than if you go second.
Yes.
You can still very much win games. I go second often with my orcs because I'm. But it becomes a lot harder against certain matchups for you to really play it the way you want to.
Absolutely.
So that's number one on the list, I
Yeah.
think, for sure.
Okay.
I'd also love to see some more detachments that add variety. So
Yes.
I think this detachment's really cool. I think it feels very orky. You're seeing a lot
Mhm.
of really cool armies out of it. There's obviously a lot of depth into building it. But it'd be really cool to see just a lot of themes that orcs could really take advantage of. You know, you have the
Yes.
speed freaks, you got the beast snaggas, you could do
Mm.
like a walker kind of dreadnoughty list
Yeah,
or
Dread
something
Mob would
if
be
you want to.
really
Yeah.
fun. Yeah,
Like thinking of the last book and all the different options that they had, or
yeah.
there's a lot of really cool ways you could go. That'd be really cool. One of the leading detachments I'd love to see, and I don't know how they would achieve this, but it'd be really cool to see. It's something that really gets you back to kind of the mobs on foot,
Yeah.
20-man mobs on foot, because that's
Yeah.
something which I think orcs haven't had for a while now,
Mm.
and it'd be really cool to see that kind of
Like
detachment.
genuine green tide situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Mm.
So, and then I don't know, man. Just new. One more. Just one more works. Always
More
one more.
stuff, more units, something
Yeah,
else, something else.
something new.
We've seen a model previously. It looks like it has a big gun. So
Yes,
one thing I actually miss is the shock attack gun. I don't know if did you play them in 8th edition, Brian?
I
They
did
they
know.
had a gun that sometimes would just kill God, and you didn't know if it was going to do it, and it was very fun. Called it was like a relic shock attack gun, and I'd frankly, although I found it very annoying at the time, I'd like that to be back in there because I think they deserve something like that, where it's like I don't have much shooting, but if this decides to have its moment, it's going to just delete whatever it looks at. So some kind of massive souped up gun would be very funny on like a big mech or something.
There are definitely some units I think could come down in points too, like dramatically.
Yeah.
That comes into play. Like I think commandos are just way too expensive.
Yeah, it'd be
They're
nice if you could
really
just
cool
have
unit.
fives of them, to be
Yeah,
honest.
fives of them would be really cool.
Yeah.
Ludas hitting on sixes is like, well, what are we doing? If they hit on fives, it might be interesting to take them. They're still only AP1.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tank buses being a buck 10 for five guys don't do any damage is also like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, all of those specialist 5-man units need another look, really, don't they? I mean, Burner Boys are
Yeah.
probably okay, but the
Burner Boys
rest,
actually quite like.
yeah,
I've actually
they're
been playing
okay.
around with Burner Boys.
Yeah,
They're pretty great for 60 points. Ludas would be great for 50 if they were just BS5.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
they're BS6, so they never hit anything. But there's a lot of those little units I think that are really cool and could really come down to points, and it would be totally fine.
yeah,
So it'd be nice to revisit the kind of the points on all the things, even if
yeah.
you don't change the
So
rules.
the toolkit units, I think. Oh, yeah, I think that'd be really nice to see. Wonderful. Okay, Brian, I massively appreciate you making the time for this. I will see you at ITT very shortly, where I hope that you will take lots of names and hopefully not ours, because hopefully we'll just dodge you. Really appreciate you coming on. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back again with more State of Play in the future. So get out there and go smash some stuff with your orcs if you like that kind of thing. I strongly encourage it. Bye bye.
Yes.